My colleagues must not treat working Americans as political hostages. This does not have to be, nor should it be, contentious. We don't have to divide along the usual lines so soon after we came together for the country. To my Democratic colleagues, please, please, do not block emergency aid you do not even oppose just because you want something more. Do not block emergency aid you do not oppose just because you want something more.
Democrats doing this for a second time. Pelosi already pulled this nonsense before. And I think she was a little bit surprised because she's so used to the media carrying the water for her, and she's never held accountable for any of her disgraceful conduct, any of her lies, any of the things that she does. They always say it's Republicans' fault. And you had that brilliant lesson in propaganda from CNN where it went from Democrats block bill to get money to small business owners to bill stalls due to Democrat and Republican inability to reach a deal or however it was that they just this is what you expect, right? People who run these news organizations, they're pandering to their audiences, and the lib audience, especially the CNN lib audience, they've been thinking for a long time that they're seeing things as they are. The news that they like, that they read, they don't view it as supporting their biases. They think that's objective truth. And so that's why when you challenge it, when you point out that Fraud and Cooper and Lemon and all these different people over there are frauds, that they're not objective journalists, their audience will fight you on that because they like that thought. They like that feeling of, no, I'm sophisticated. I watch CNN. You know, it's a personal branding experience for them. It has nothing to do with the reality of CNN now as the propaganda arm of the DNC and Jeff Zucker's little fiefdom for his feud with Donald Trump. And some of the media outlets out there that you've probably come to know as, well, you know, left-wing, progressive organizations, they're starting to struggle. And it's interesting to see this. Vox.com, which was I used to refer to as Beta Male Central, which I think is an accurate description of it. I mean, the moment that you see the kind of people who write for them and who work there, and they're just always, they really do. It feels like they got the cast, male and female cast of the HBO show Girls and made them a bunch of journalists. That's what Vox is. Ezra Klein is the founder, who's a very smarmy and highly overrated, quote, public intellectual who's wrong on stuff, laughably wrong on things all the time. But he looks like a wonk. And so they think that he is a wonk. That's really all that it takes on the left. The Vox raised, I saw this today, I couldn't believe it, $300 million. And they're saying that they're having trouble paying their bills right now. And so they want people, leftists, to kick in and just give them money. They're going out there hat in hand now. They raised $300 million. This is why I get so upset on the right. You know, we have conservatives who are titans of industry and business, and you know they don't want to fund something that will really help with our ideas. Maybe they don't want to take the heat, but we don't do this. The left plays the media game in terms of owning institutions and building platforms so much better than we do. Look at us. We completely missed out on Amazon, on Netflix, on these institutions that now they've replaced Hollywood studios. Their influence on the public mind, their influence on our conversation as a country is stronger than any Hollywood. It's not even close, stronger than any Hollywood studio. And they have a much bigger bankroll, too. I was watching The Crown last night, actually. I'll tell you more about that one later. One thing that's just stunning about that series, that show on Netflix, which I highly recommend. Even if you think you're not going to like it, I didn't think I was going to like it. It's actually good for what they do a very good job, and it's historically pretty accurate. But the amount of money they've spent on that production is just stunning. And it's a reminder of what Netflix, what Amazon, what these digital giants can do now when it comes to funding. And YouTube, and you know, they are the ones that have real control over what your kids see, what your kids think now in the media world. So remember that. Places like the Washington Post, you know, they're now legacy institutions propped up by the digital titans in that space. Obviously, Jeff Bezos of Amazon owns the Washington Post now, which is probably the reason the Washington Post is able to keep going as it does. They employ one of the more hilariously dishonest and just completely insane, quote, conservative writers. She's not a conservative at all. And I realize now that her entire shtick is really just to gaslight everyone and to agitate people who are conservatives by her saying that. You know, she's doing this. It's a little bit like in the show The Office when Jim Halpert is dressed entirely as Dwight Schrute, and the whole gag is that, you know, he's now pretending to be Dwight, and it drives Dwight, the character, insane. Jennifer Rubin goes around pretending to be a conservative to try to drive us all nuts. She tweeted this out last night, and I do think this is something that we should remember, and I will continue to say this. It could be because it influences the way they'll talk about this national crisis right now on the economic side, on the health side. This must be weaponized against Trump. They do not put that aside for a moment. They intend to hold him fully, not just accountable, but to use this to bludgeon the Trump campaign into submission on behalf of Joe Biden, who is locked in a basement somewhere, you know, trying to remember where he left his pajama pants. You know, like that's what's going on right now. And Jennifer Rubin tweeted out last night, and this is the quote: "If Biden is serious about winning, he needs to accuse Trump of willingness to kill people." Now, this is one of those she said out loud, well, we know a lot of them are thinking moments, but they are thinking that. And that is going to be a major part of the debate in the weeks ahead. They're just going to say that Trump doesn't care about people dying. They said this about Bush, too. I mean, Bush wasn't a perfect president by any stretch, and I have my bones to pick with George H.W. Bush. But he was a good man, and he was doing his best, and he was honorable, and he was ethical. And they acted like Bush didn't care about our dead soldiers. Bush didn't care about dead civilians. Bush was a warmonger. Bush was horrible. Get ready for that with Trump. It's going to be, before it was Bush lied, babies died with the Iraq War. With this COVID-19, it's going to be, I don't know what the rhyme is yet, so apologies, but it'll be something like, you know, Trump lied, grandma died. I mean, that's what they're going to say. That's going to be the tagline that they use here. That's going to be the phrase that you hear endlessly, because otherwise they have to actually defend the actions, not just of Joe Biden, but of the Democratic Party, which is what I know I initially was talking to you about. How can they justify blocking this aid? There are thousands and thousands of people waiting in lines for food because small businesses have laid them off, because there's so much less commerce going on. And one thing that this is really showing all of us is how the class of elites in this country is overwhelmingly drawn from people who don't understand the basics of how a business or the economy works. I mean, a lot of the political class I'm talking about in particular, the political class is a lot of, you know, B+ students from second tier schools who got a law degree and couldn't get into, you know, Cravath or whatever law firm they wanted. So they decided to run for state senate or state rep. And now all of a sudden they're a U.S. senator. I mean, look at Joe Biden. Look at Joe Biden. That's who is running the country. These people don't understand. They don't understand how a business functions. They don't understand how a business works. They have no idea. You think AOC knows how a business works? She thinks that now look, she did a real job, and I give her credit for this. And I don't agree with conservatives who are always mocking her as a bartender, as if that's something to be mocked. Bartender's an honorable job. It's actually a tough job from friends. I have lots of friends who have done that job. So I don't like that. You know, people do this though. They don't like somebody. It's the same kind of mentality when I'm saying, hey, you know, maybe we should try a more targeted infusion of capital to small business owners to deal with, so that they can put rent money in the economy too. And the response I'll see on Twitter from a lot of libs is like, you know, you're so ugly, go shoot yourself. And it's like, well, what does that have to do with anything? But people are crazy, right? People are nuts. So I don't like it when they mock AOC for being a bartender, because there's nothing to mock there. There's nothing funny about that or wrong about that. It's a good job, just like any other job. But I do think that if you had to, and she's an econ major, as she likes to point out, an econ major who won a big science prize in high school that she still talks about now. That's right. I am a science and econ whiz. I think that she figures she shows up and there's alcohol there and she pours it for people and they give her money and that's it. And now that's true, but I don't think that she has an understanding of that employer has to pay numerous salaries. That employer has to pay insurance on the building, rent on the building, has to deal with purveyors. Surveyors. Whoa, I want to see what the landscape is. No, they have to deal with people that are their suppliers, and they have to run that on credit usually, and they buy it on credit and then they sell. And, I don't think she has even the faintest understanding of that. And I'm not trying to pick on her. I think she has a French bulldog, by the way, which at least she has good taste in dogs. So there's that. All of the folks these days, all the cool people have French bulldogs, right? That's another thing that I've learned now. Dana Lash, French bulldogs. One of the producers of the show on the first, French bulldog. I'm trying to think. A lot of cool people have French bulldogs. But I mean the AOC mentality about not understanding why businesses need the cash that they need soon and what they need it for, that's widespread all throughout the government. I mean, Nancy Pelosi doesn't know. Nancy Pelosi's been in public office for decades and decades and has got a super rich husband. She doesn't, no idea. Doesn't know how to read a balance sheet. She doesn't understand profit and loss statements. So this is the recognition that we have that the people that are making the determinations about how we're supposed to go forward here economically don't really understand it. I mean, on the elected political side. And the Democrats slowing this thing down are being absolutely disgraceful, but they don't care. They just don't care. They're going to do whatever they can to make sure. Oh, here, I'm mentioning Pelosi before. Here she is. Here's what she says. Now, remember, this is very straightforward. There's a program to get money to small businesses so they can continue to pay employees, which is very important. The loan amount wasn't enough. So the Republicans came out and said, look, we've seen so much cash go out. We need more cash for this program. That's all this is. This is like, hey, America gave, the Congress gave America $20 for pizza. And it turns out the pizza cost $25. So Congress turns around and says, or the Republicans turn around and say, hey, can we get the extra $5 for the pizza? And Nancy Pelosi has this to say about it. Play 6.
Secretary Mnuchin called and asked for $250 billion in 48 hours. With no data, just $250 billion in 48 hours. This morning, Leader McConnell honored that request. I say honored, really dishonored the needs that we have, with a stunt on the floor of the Senate requesting that $250 billion. No data as to why we need it and the rest. When there are outstanding needs, we should have been doing, and what we offered to do was to sit down and figure out what the numbers are that are needed most urgently. And so you may have seen this morning that this stunt was performed by the Senate leader, knowing that it would fail.
Yeah, it's a stunt to get cash in an emergency to people who really need it, Nancy. Isn't she amazing? Completely shameless. I mean, when it comes to shame, she is like the Terminator. She does not feel. She does not have remorse. She does not care. She just keeps coming and coming and coming with the same crap all the time. Yeah, that's right. Nancy needed to see more data, so she makes sure that the money, it's a loan program for small businesses they've already signed off on. All they're doing is adding the amount of money that they can loan out. She wants to slow it down because what? Republicans are lying? They're just giving money out to small businesses that need it, that fall under criteria the Democrats have already signed off on. All this really is we need more money for the program you've already said is okay. Like I said, it's okay. We're allowed to order pizza. We have $20, but we need 25. Can you give us the last $5? Nope. I want to see the data on that pizza. That's Nancy's argument here. She's the worst, folks. I mean, she really is. I know it doesn't need to be said in the sense that we're already aware of it, but it needs to be said because it should be, because she deserves it. She's just not a good, honorable, or ethical person. And this isn't even about politics. This is just about who this person is in this position of power at this time and continuously. I've never heard anybody who admires her character who's someone with character that I think even exists. That I will say. I've never heard it. Maybe someone out there, but not in my lifetime, not in my experience.
For some reason, we have an enormous problem with enacting the Defense Production Act for saving lives and guaranteeing healthcare. Now that I think that points to a much deeper problem with the systemic priorities that we currently have in the United States, but it's never too late to change it. We must organize to change those priorities from our budget to our production. We have to start demanding and organizing from the bottom up, from grassroots movements, from nurses to warehouse workers to grocery store employees to the halls of Congress, demanding that we strip profit motive out of our decisions and reprioritize the public good and the health of everyday people.
Whenever AOC talks, it sounds to me as though it's like a computer program that pulls together all of the social justice jargon that you would hear in the faculty lounge of a small liberal arts college in the Northeast, and you just stuck a bunch of words together from it. You know, deprioritize. There are all these phrases that you'll hear. You know, deprioritizing the profit motive, and they love words like systemic, carceral. You'll hear that one a lot when they're talking about prison policies. Carceral now has become a term that the social justice left uses. I mean, I should really just it'd be fun to do a whole segment on the words that identify one as a leftist, that you'll always hear them constantly throwing it in and making sure that they're asserting that identity just by their choice of word usage. But what she's saying here, that we strip the profit motive out of our decisions and reprioritize the public good and the health of everyday people. I want to know what she thinks should happen with the hospitals that are currently furloughing, individual hospitals furloughing hundreds and hundreds of employees because they can't pay them because there's no business going on, because the healthcare is a business. And if you want doctors to spend years of their lives in medical school and overwhelmingly taking out loans to do so, you're going to have to pay them. And that money's going to have to come from somewhere, and it's going to have to pay them enough that they're willing to do it, or else they'll just do something else. They'll be a lazy-ass journalist sitting on their couch blogging for BuzzFeed, right? So trying to unlearn everything that we have seen from the 20th into the 21st century about how powerful capitalism is as a tool for prosperity, for lifting people out of poverty. More people lifted out of poverty by the profit motive, which is at work in a capitalist system in the 20th century than in all human history before it combined. And yet AOC thinks she knows better. Yes, just put people like her in charge to deprioritize profit and make the public good and the health of everyday people the priority, because that's not going to be a problem. That's not going to go badly for you. Remember this when I tell you that the powers that they're taking right now for themselves, that we are told, even by conservatives, oh, it's just an emergency. It's just an emergency. Right. That's because we agree on this emergency. Who says we're going to agree the next time around that it actually is an emergency when something comes up?
Can you imagine a time where Americans carry certificates of immunity?
You know, that's possible. I mean, it's one of those things that we talk about when we want to make sure that we know who the vulnerable people are and not. This is something that's being discussed. I think it might actually have some merit under certain circumstances.
We're hearing a lot about the need to come together and to accept that right now in this extreme situation, there are going to be there are enormous changes to our lives, but also there'll be some areas that we just have to go with what the consensus is, that usually we would have rights, we'd have protections, but no, now that's all changing. And one part of this, one area of this is with privacy and the talk of surveillance, which is the word you're hearing a lot now for cases of this virus. Now, when you're saying when surveillance is something like, for example, testing and having real-time data returned to government authorities so they can see, there's been an outbreak in this city. We need to make sure we get the resources there, put public health personnel on alert, and get the word out because of our instantaneous communications, because of social media. We can very easily let people know if there has been, let's say, a resurgence of COVID-19 in their area. Okay, fine. Good. But when we talk about things like tracking with GPS, whether people are sheltering at home, tracking where active cases are of this and making sure that people are quarantining properly. Again, I can understand, okay, you're supposed to quarantine. They want to make sure you stay in your home. But this, in any other era in my lifetime, there would be a lot of concern over government overreach and what this means for the future. And civil liberties are not something that you just cast aside and say, hey, maybe one day we'll revisit this, but things are really tough right now. There's always supposed to be some advocacy, some reminder out there of why we have the checks and balances that we do, and why we have even sometimes at the cost of what would be a better outcome. There are things in place in our system that say we need to have individual liberty protections that are not to be violated just because of the needs of the state as determined by people either in elected office or federal agencies. And, you can see here's just one example of this within the system. The fruit of the poison tree doctrine. And, this has been around for decades now. And it's that if the police search your car illegally, this is the classic example. The police search your car illegally and they find a murder weapon in the trunk. If it's a truly illegal search, not a good faith search, that will not be admissible in court. Now we look at this and we say, well, hold on a second. I mean, if this guy's a murderer, don't we want to throw him in prison? Well, we have these protections in place for the individual, and we don't let the government violate them because there's also an important good there. There used to be institutions, the ACLU, as much as it's always been liberal, there used to be institutions that would make these cases. But now all of what had been the major civil liberty institutions out there are effectively left-wing, lawyer programs that are able to get tax-deductible donations and then advocate for, whatever George Soros would basically want them to, right? That's what's really happened. But I bring this up because we're seeing all these stories from across the country of government acting in ways that we all know is unacceptable. And sometimes they've been willing to go back and apologize for it. But then we also turn around and say, well, hold on a minute. It's unacceptable, but why do they keep doing it? If we're also clear on what reasonable activity for the government should be, even during a pandemic, why are they doing things that are absurd? I mean, flatly absurd. Here are some examples of this that come to mind. Right now, Michigan has determined that there will be a ban on travel between residences. So, and there are some, I'm trying to remember what the exceptions are. Here we go. Except for purposes such as caring for a relative, a pet, or visiting a nursing home, or attending a funeral with no more than 10 people, you are not allowed to go from one residence to another. So, for example, I have my brothers here in New York City. They're sheltering in place, too. I'm allowed to walk outside. I would not be under the Michigan rules. Now, whether people will obey these or not is a whole other question. I would not be allowed to walk to one of my, brother's apartments here in New York and spend some time with my brother, understanding that, yeah, you're introducing another human being into your space, and there's the possibility that one of us could be asymptomatic. But it's a very, very limited circle, and we're being cautious. But I wouldn't be able to do that, right? I would not be able to do that, even with brother of mine who is in the lower age risk category for the very low age risk category for the disease, even lower than me. So we're supposed to think that's okay? Now the government can tell you can't go see a friend. You have to stay in your home, and they're going to fine you for that. Boston has is it Boston or is it no? It's a town. I forget which. There's a town in Massachusetts right now where they are setting up. It's not Boston. I think it's a suburb of Boston where they're setting up one-way sidewalks. So you know how we all, I hope that everybody understands this, right? When you're on an escalator, you want to stand, you're on the right. If you want to walk, you're on the left. You're all going in the same direction. We all know this, right? This is intuitive. And I think because of the way that we drive in this country, you're going one way, you go to the right, you go the other way, you're going the left. And we all line up with each other pretty readily in that. That's just the way we think. Well, what's going on now in this town is they're setting up sidewalks so that there's going to be one sidewalk where you go north and one sidewalk where you go south. And you got to cross the street if you want it. You can't just be, they're doing this to improve social distancing, and they're going to fine people $100. Well, this is another instance where you say, how much benefit is this really going to give anyone? And look, it's a $100 fine, although people right now are really hurting for money. So a $100 fine could really be painful for a lot of folks, but they're not throwing people in prison for 6 months or something. I'm not trying to overstate this, but you see this all across the country, all these municipalities and all these different state ordinances that, and they're encouraging snitching in Los Angeles. And I'm just troubled by this because this is not who we are. Americans don't snitch on their neighbors because their neighbor wants to get some fresh air. Americans don't, call out somebody because they're going for a walk with, a loved one, their significant other or whatever, and they're not maintaining 6 feet of perfect space between the two of them. I mean, who knows what they're doing behind closed doors? I don't think they're maintaining 6 feet of distance, folks. Right? So this is not who we are, and I just find it troubling because there's so little pushback against it in general, particularly in the media. I think everyone's so on board in the media because, most media people most of them still have their jobs. They're still getting paid. That will change if this continues on, as I've been saying, but they're much less affected by this than some of the others. I gotta say that there should be more of a sense that we're telling the government, you guys know this is only going to be for a few weeks, right? I mean, we should let the government needs to be put on notice a little bit about this, that we, the people, will not comply for anything more than just a very, very brief duration here with this crisis going on. Yeah, that's, I'd like to see more of that. And then you also get into there are some people that I think in public life are taking a little bit of Schadenfreude at the shutdown that's going on of religious and spiritual life. As you know, we're heading into this weekend is going to be Easter, and it's the holiest day of the year for Christians, and it's also, unfortunately, it seems like this year going to be the day when it may be the day of the greatest amount of death in the United States from COVID-19. That's possible. That's what the models are predicting as of right now. And there does seem to be a tone among some of the elites that, sorry, you silly Bible thumpers, but you better stay at home or else. Here's John Meacham, who he's such an annoying, smug lib. I will not read any more of his books. I've read a couple of them in the past. But here's what he says. Play 7.
So how are you going to be celebrating Easter with the social distancing going on right now? Well, are you changing at all?
Yeah, well, obviously, because we'd be at church.
Some people are going to church, though. Some people are defying it and saying that, no, the church service itself is part of their religious expression and part of their Christian tradition, and they're not going to stop going. What do you think of that?
Being willfully stupid is not part of the Christian tradition. You just don't. Don't do it. The early Christians met in houses. They met quietly. We actually have a chance here to have the most authentic Easter you can imagine. It began when the disciples were in hiding. The disciples were socially distanced because they were afraid they were going to get arrested. We are going to be, in our households, all because we're trying to be safe.
Don't be stupid, he says to people who are even considering trying to come together to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ with their fellow Christians. Look, the liberal mentality is on display for all of us to see on a regular basis these days. They just do not. The elites, the people that go on, on MSNBC and CNN and ABC News, and the Hollywood stars that are doing TikTok videos and all this stuff, they don't care about the food lines. I don't mean the lines to get into grocery stores. I mean people that are in line with their families trying to get food from a pantry. They need food. They don't have the money and they don't have the ability to get enough food. I don't care about those people. And they're able to dismiss, especially in more rural areas, they're able to dismiss all those people by saying, well, sorry, we're too busy saving lives. That's the attitude now. I'm too busy saving a life by being in my Hamptons mansion here, and looking out over the ocean and making sure that I'm getting all of my deliveries from Whole Foods left for me on the doorstep, right? I mean, it's really easy for them. It's a lot harder for other people across the country that are really worried about this economically. And the disparaging of people that still want to try to maintain some spiritual life through this, I think it's just because for a lot of elites, the notion that anybody would rely on a relationship with God in a moment like this, you don't rely on God, you rely on Dr. Fauci. That's their attitude. That's what they think. That's their move. Whew. Well, we'll see how that shakes out for them in the long run.
Thanks to President Trump, we have gotten everything we need, including but not limited to PPE and ventilators. We of all our ventilators in the state, only about 20% right now are in use. Our numbers are headed in the right direction. We still have to be vigilant, but while we save lives, we've also got to get started saving livelihood. We got to get this economy back open.
We do have to get the economy back open. We have to make sure that we're taking care of everybody that we can economically, health-wise, of course, first and foremost. Got to keep everyone alive that you can. Do everything you can to save every life that comes into our healthcare system, everyone that's in duress. But we need to help the people that are out of work and do what we can for them, and that includes college students. Very interesting to see how, the two areas of American life where we've had the biggest expansion of expense and adjusted for inflation, by far, healthcare and college tuition. It's just, they're out of control. Food, a lot of other things are actually more expensive now than they used to be as well. A bigger part of our paychecks than they used to be. But college and healthcare have just exploded in the last 20, 30 years. And college students are taking out these massive loans to go to these, really just these, big spoiled brat pampered factories of excess. I mean, it's ridiculous what's going on in a lot of these places. My school that I went to was very expensive too. I don't look. It was just a credential. It was necessary to get certain kinds of jobs coming in. Yeah, did it help me get into the CIA? Sure. But it's a credentialing program. And beyond that, you have to ask sometimes, well, what am I really paying for here? And I actually did homework and studied. I actually tried in college. A lot of people don't. A lot of people do. I'm not saying that, but a lot of friends who, and I mean at the fancy schools too. You can go to Harvard and do nothing. You really can. But now with the coronavirus situation and people being told they have to leave campus, which for universities was absurd. See, a university is a perfect example of exactly what I think they should have not done. They should have kept people on campus. They should have kept the students on campus. And if you were a faculty member or you're somebody who is at higher risk, shelter in place, which for a lot of these faculty members is like what they do anyway. They're tenured. They teach one class a week, so they stay in their off-campus cottage for 6 months while we figure out, what to do, what's going on here. And, there were ways to do this that did not involve sending everybody back home, especially because I'm sure there were a lot of infections on campus we didn't even know about, and they went back home and might have infected grandma and grandpa or mom and dad who might have been in a high-risk health category. But the schools didn't refund, at least in some cases, haven't refunded tuition. They fired the lowest paid workers on campus. These are schools with I'm talking about the fancy schools now. These schools with, enormous endowments. People are paying $50,000, $60,000 a year to go there. It's absurd. Well, at least the college students look like they're going to get a little bit of help here. President Trump was talking about this one, and producer Mark, wait, I just lost it. Where did it go? Oh yes, clip 9.
The Department of Education is also announcing the availability of more than $6 billion in emergency grant funding to assist college students impacted by the cancellation of classes and the suspension of housing. A lot of people had a lot of things suspended. Housing is one of them. Previously, we waived student loan payments for 6 months. So student loan payments have been waived for 6 months. So we'll discuss it after that. may go further.
So they're trying to do things to help the college students. I wanted to circle back for a second. The certificate of immunity thing that Fauci's been talking about. We are entering something that's going to feel more and more like some sci-fi dystopian American future in terms of the kinds of concessions that people seem to be willing to make. Now, I do think that the serology testing and all that's going to be a good thing, but the government declaring who can and cannot go to work based on a blood test. I understand the circumstances around this right now, but I also think that, wow, how quickly we just decide that our liberties and and everyone's just scared. They're just going to do whatever the government says, I guess. That's where people seem to be now.